Should we really love our enemies, as the Bible says? In your personal life, this is already a crucial question. But in world politics, it can be an issue of life and death for millions of people. Today, I'll give you a tale from the crypt of history, because history has given a definite answer to this difficult question, whether you should love your enemies. And I will let you decide for yourself. And the story is that time when the United States saved their sworn enemy. It's the time when they saved the Bolsheviks and the communist regime in Soviet Union. They saved them from an early collapse and an absolute disaster. And at the end of the video, we will see what are the lessons of that story, not just for the world of today, but also for our own lives. So the year is 1921, and the communist regime, the regime of the Bolsheviks in Russia, is crumbling, and it is collapsing after only 3 years in power. And it's crumbling because years of war and civil war have taken their toll, but most importantly, because the crazy politics of the communists have brought hunger and famine to the country. There were no markets, the most productive individuals were persecuted, and predictably, there was nothing to eat. The situation was so desperate that one of the most prominent communists in the whole world, someone who was a celebrity within the Soviet Union, Maxim Gorky, the author Maxim Gorky, he swallowed his communist pride and he wrote an open letter to the West asking for help. And it's difficult to convey to you how crazy that request for help was. Because remember, the communists came to power only 3 years before, promising to destroy the capitalist imperialist system of the West. And now, one of the most famous true believers of communism goes to the West and says, please help us. This is, imagine the Church of Satan or something asking the Vatican and the Pope for a bailout. It was as unimaginable. But you know what is even more unimaginable and crazy? It is that Maxim Gorky's scheme actually worked. The humanitarians in the West, from the Red Cross, religious groups, the Quakers, they rushed to help. They rushed to help the country that was sworn to destroy them. And the main burden for sending aid to Soviet Union would be carried by the American state itself through the American Relief Administration. That was an organization led by future President Herbert Hoover. And the idea behind this help was, look, we know that the communists are enemies. We know that they're butchering and slaughtering innocent people. But, there are people suffering. There are people who are in need. There are people who are hungry, and we can help them. And as good Christians, as good altruists, we have to help. Otherwise, children will die. More children will die. And all this was true. More children were dying. So Americans decide we have to help our enemies. There was only one problem though. How to persuade the communist leaders in Soviet Union to accept the help. Yes, you got this right. It was the communists who were imposing conditions and had demands on how the evil capitalist and imperialist would bail them out. You've heard the saying, beggars cannot be choosers. Well, in this case, the beggars could be choosers. And finally, Trotsky and Lenin and the rest of the communist leaders were persuaded to accept the help. And the American Relief Administration ended up feeding millions and millions of Soviets every single day. And this was a heroic effort. It was because back then it was not easy to go around in Soviet Union. It was massive, huge country. Russia is huge. And they also provided medical aid, vaccination programs. And in the meanwhile, what do the communists do? The Soviet government, the Communist Party, was trying to sabotage the aid. It was charging aid workers for their tickets to travel within Soviet Union to feed the people. It had the secret police harassing the Americans and the volunteers who were trying to help. That was the thank you of the communists to their enemies who were saving their people. And yet the Americans managed to save millions of lives. The famine of the early 20s initially claimed some 3 to 5 million people before Americans intervened. And without the American help, who knows, this could have been one of the biggest historical tragedies ever. And indeed, many innocent children and many good people were saved by the American aid, which indeed was heroic. But you know who else was saved? The communist regime was saved. Aided, assisted by the American help, the communists did not collapse. And then the communist regime went out to terrorize even more people. In fact, the communist regime saved in the early 20s, in the early 30s, 10 years later, they brought another famine to their people, which claimed even more people. Some say more than 5 million people. Many of them died in Ukraine. You might have heard it as the Holodomor. And then that communist regime that survived because of the American help went on and allied itself with Hitler in 1939. But before that, they had terrorized and killed even more people in the Great Terror who perished in torture chambers and gulags, and hundreds of thousands of them were executed. Many of the people, by the way, who perished in the terror were people who had cooperated with the American Relief Administration. So then the Soviets align with Hitler, they take half of Poland. After World War, in the meanwhile, they changed sides, they came with the Allies. So the Americans helped them very generously with the Lend-Lease program. They gave them food, trucks, technology. And with these trucks, they stormed Central and Eastern Europe. And they subjugated for 45 years millions of people who suffered, and hundreds of thousands of them died. And because the Soviets were bailed out in 1921, 25 years later, they provided key assistance to Mao, and China became communist. And communist China is still with us today. And I know what you're thinking. So what are you telling us, Nikos? That the Americans should have left the children to starve and die in 1921? And I totally get how impossibly difficult this dilemma is. I'm just inviting you to think. Why were all these innocents suffering? Because of whom? Well, it was because of the communists. And yes, you help innocents with your aid, with your charity, with your generosity, but you're not only giving handouts to innocent good people. You're also handing the bad guy the gun with which he will later kill you. You are enabling the communist rulers to then turn this power against you, that they have against you. And of course, it's the same horrible beliefs and ideas and ideologies that motivate them wanting to destroy you, that were also destroying the innocent people within these countries. And it gets worse, because some of these innocent people, and some maybe not innocent because they're doing it willingly, but also some innocent, they are then put into work to fuel the war machine and the machine of hatred that will then turn against you, as it happened in Soviet Union. later with the Cold War and with all the communist international in the 30s that wanted to destroy the West. But this isn't, tragically, this isn't just a story about the past. Because this is a story that is still playing out as we speak, in the world of today. Think about Israel, for example. Israel has been facing, for ages, a hostile population in Gaza, and a regime that wants to annihilate it. And yet, until 2023, Israel was providing significant amounts of water, electricity, infrastructure to Gaza. And Israel got the thank you card on October 7. Actually, still today, while Israel is fighting to reclaim the hostages and to destroy Hamas, Israel is still trying to feed and to take care of a population that is, at least in its majority, hostile to it. Fighting and at the same time helping your enemy. But that's an impossible situation. Such a war is unwinnable. And again, I totally get it. What about the children? What about the people who want to live a good life? What about the people who don't like these rulers? Yes, but also what about the Israelis dying in order to protect the innocent among their enemies? So who benefits from this? Who benefits when you sacrifice for your enemy? Is it the good guys who benefit on both sides? Or is it the bad guys who benefit? Or here's another example. North Korea. North Korea, after decades of crazy communist rule by the cult of the dynasty of the Kims, North Korea was facing a horrendous famine in the 1990s. And one could actually say that the North Koreans deserved even more sympathy than any other innocent victims in a bad regime, because many people suffer without a fault of their own. It's almost impossible to be a dissident there. People are brainwashed. So again, what happened? The familiar pattern. The states that North Korea considered its biggest enemies, South Korea and the United States, they rushed to help. And hundreds of thousands of tons of food was delivered to North Korea. And millions of people were surely saved by this charity, by this aid. But who else was saved? The regime. And the regime is still there today. And fast forward today, the regime has actually acquired nuclear weapons. And these weapons are aimed at South Korea. This was their thank you. And who knows, maybe Kim will give these weapons to jihadis or rogue groups, and we're all going to suffer for this. So yes, millions were saved, but even more millions have been suffering since then, living under such a horrible dictatorship. And who knows what else this crazy regime will do. So here is the lesson. A lesson that applies not only in world politics, but also in our everyday life and to the people we interact with. And the lesson is that bad people, when they're left to their own devices, they're useless. The evil that they can do is relatively limited. And the bad people know this. But here is the insidious thing that they do. They know that they can guilt the better people, the people who buy into the morality that says, oh, you have a duty to help anyone in need, even if by doing so you are actually helping someone who wants to hurt you. So they know that you're going to be guilted by this morality, and they use this morality to blackmail you. They want to make you feel guilty, that you have a duty to help them. Remember, this is what the Soviets did. They played tough and they imposed conditions to the Soviets, to the Americans to get the help, because the idea was, oh, we are in need, you have a duty to help us, otherwise you're not good humanitarians. Sure, we want to destroy you, but hey, what are you going to do? And then you, the good people, help them. Or it looks like you're helping the innocent among them. But actually what ends up happening is you are emboldening and you are empowering the bad people to do even greater evil against you and against other innocent people. And the thinker who gave the best illustration of this scheme, where bad people are guilting you into helping them, and then they unleash even more evil, well, the thinker who explained this best was Ayn Rand. And I encourage people to read her novel Atlas Shrugged, because one of the many things going on in the novel is a study of what happens when the good people, again, out of the generosity of their heart, are giving an aiding hand to scoundrels and to killers. And then the killers take the help and say, okay, my thank you is now I'll destroy you. So at the end of the day, you're going to ask, are you telling us then to turn a blind eye to the suffering of the innocents because they're held hostages by evil rulers? And again, this is such a difficult conundrum. And the predicament of these innocents is so absolutely heartbreaking. I'm saying this though. History has shown time and again that when you love your enemy, eventually good people will suffer. And when you love your enemy, bad people will get away with doing even worse things and bringing even more evil. Thank you for your time.